Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, welcome to the show, Serving Nerve. Today I'm going to talk ever so slightly in a conspiratorial sense, but it is not to actually denounce the legitimacy of things that I propose on this channel as well, or in this video as well. It's just to make a point when it comes to the news. Now, no, we're not going to be talking about just fake news. Most news is usually picked up really quick, and the fake news is usually just poorly researched news by people who want to get a lot of views, a lot of clicks. But a lot of the time, when I talk about the concept of news, I really have a naughty, dirty obsession with it. It is a very interesting concept, getting the news. And this sounds so silly, I know, but with the internet, it's so much easier to find your own news these days that when you hear news being broadcasted by a major TV corporation, you start to really think, what else can I find? And this is when you start going down the rabbit hole of people putting out news, but there being something even bigger out there for you to take a look at. And it's just not as popular, or it is not wanted to be talked about due to its controversial and potentially demonetizable nature. But I have to say, my favorite thing about the news is looking at it and then trying to figure out what people aren't paying attention to. And, it's not to belittle any points made in the news. But when it comes to a lot of these things, I feel like news, in this day and age, as it is presented, is a distraction, almost a distraction entirely, for something else that could be happening, and we just don't notice it because we're too distracted by something else. And I feel like this always happens. Just in general, I feel like whenever there's something really wild and crazy happening, some other wild and crazy thing's gonna happen. In order to kind of trump that, I feel like the news is a massive distraction for an overarching theme of even more things that are more distracting that we don't want to be distracted by. So basically, other forms of news and media will take superiority over them, whether it's intentional or not. But it's a really interesting concept because, I usually will hear about, O.J. Simpson died, and I'm like, I don't care. He was kind of an asshole. I feel like a lot of people will think like that. But why is it out there? Because an insignificant pawn is unworthy of our attention. What's the other form of attention that we should probably be driving towards something else? And even if it doesn't have anything to do with the news, why are we as individuals, basically being proposed all of this, information that's unnecessary for our well-being and success? I just don't understand exactly. And I know you can use the news to get a better grasp of the times, figure out, your next move based on the current economic or social status of whatever country you're in. But generally speaking, I've never actually found any successful output from the news to give me any grace or ability to progress in life. But generally speaking, when it comes to news, I do believe that it is a massive distraction, and for your own well-being, unless it pertains to your particular area, I just usually ignore it. And you could say it's bad to ignore the news, but I find that there's a great benefit with it. I usually have more time for myself, more time for my family, more time for my friends, more time to actually research real laws and or look into information that I need to become successful with business, to know what I'm doing in my country, to know what I'm having going on around me. And I get it's good not to live in your thoughtless bubble of thoughtlessness, that with which news might help drive. But generally speaking, I have found it to be more harmful than good. The amounts of misinformation that trickle through the lips of newscasters is so exponentially grand that I don't know if it's even legitimate. So I have to basically, when I see the news, find what they're talking about, research the topic myself, and at that point the news is kind of useless, isn't it? It's basically just a reference point for me to get my information from. So this is why I don't like news. I don't like looking at the typical mainstream news sources. I'm almost inclined not to go onto YouTube and look for people's information, although I do really like certain YouTubers and the way that they, talk about the news. It's more on the basis of internet news, which is what I grew up around anyways, so obviously I am biased in that regard. But generally speaking, I feel like it's good to keep updated with the times. And a more important topic is everything that you see online, you're going to have to research on your own anyways. If something is put out on the news, you need to look into that in depth and find as much information on the matter as possible if it has sparked your interest that much. The news is not going to be able to do that exponentially for you. I just believe that it is good to do your own research. And I feel like when it comes to the news, you're not supposed to have to do your own research. You're supposed to just get the news. But none of the news is trustworthy anymore because there's all this misinformation and also mass interpretation and subjectivity to the information that's found, and also it's incredibly biased because every news source tends to have some sort of other agenda going on. And it's not even to be like dramatic or conspiratorial when I say that. They all have a certain agenda to make money, get those stories out quick. And also, outside of even that, some of them do have political biases, so they want to drive home more cherry-picked, politically biased stories. And this is not just on one side of the spectrum or the other, it's across the entire political spectrum. So, again, I just don't know what the point of news is, and maybe that's my own problem, but I find that the news is one of the most useless forms of media in this day and age. And it's basically just there because of billion-dollar networks and a lot of, like, I guess, sponsored content, because I don't even know who owns a TV anymore. So they have to be getting the input and output from somewhere, which has to be, like, YouTube and online. But I'm just curious as to where the money comes from, because I don't think very many people these days are super interested in the news. Maybe. They probably, in some capacity, they are, but I'm just so curious as to, like, everything's becoming digitized. And then other people online, like just random YouTubers, can get way more views than the news can. And they usually give better information these days, which is saying something because it's on just the basis of human error as well. Like, it's just as much human error. But you also are at more risk of human error because you've got no network, usually. You might have a small team of editors and stuff, or fact checkers, but the reality is, you're not gonna have, like, an entire team to work on finding your information. You're just relying mainly on you and maybe a few individuals who work with you. And that's not always the case, but I'd say it's predominantly the case. So I just find it incredibly fascinating that the news even still exists. But when it comes to the news, my number one thing that I really like to do is just take a look-see-pop at it and then go and find the exact opposite thing that they're not talking about. Because usually that is way more interesting and way more intense, and for the well-being of your own country, countries around you, etc. Might not be as popular, but it's definitely something you want to know. So usually I use the news as a reference point for other things that I'm supposed to find, and not the actual information that's put on the news, which is kind of contradictory, but it tends to work because it's found me a lot of fucked up information about shit that I shouldn't know. So the news is almost there as like an anti-information status at this point. Like, basically, if you don't want to know what you're talking about, go to the news. If you want to know what you're talking about, pick the subjectivity from that point in the news and then find that information and then learn about that information. That's what I've found. Although maybe I have spent a little bit too much time on the more conspiratorial sides of the internet, and then that's just my delusional paranoia coming to leak through onto a YouTube page, all just so that I can get a few extra views by taking away views from the big dogs. Oh yeah. No, but like legit, I just don't think the news is very useful. Maybe I'm wrong, but so far I haven't had any winnings from it, so I think that's about time to throw in the towel to even attempt to look at the news. I don't really find any information that I find particularly useful. In a political regard, it's never clear cut. You're always trying to find more information in that regard, because usually when it comes to politics, it's not just like a one single bill or one single entity. It's like a bunch of stuff, so you have to read about all of it. When it comes to the economy, it's the same thing. Like, you can't just expect, like, oh, this one thing that's happening in the news is going to make or break our economy. It's like, no, it's so multifaceted. And then when I look at, like, all the petty things, I'm like, I could just go onto, like, social media for this. So I just don't know what level of use the news has anymore. And that's kind of the video I wanted to rant about. Do you guys actually use the news? And also, like, what do you use it for? Because, like, I know I'm supposed to be able to find something from there, but I usually just, like, don't. Like, it usually is so, like, cut and dry and useless and with some potential human error in there where I gotta do the research on my own anyways. So it's like, I just don't see the point. And I know you should always do your own research no matter what, like news, YouTube, whatever the case is. Even with an article or two, you gotta double check the articles and, you know, find the references, find the actual information. I get that. But I just don't know why I would go through a third party to get my information on a continual basis at the very least. Like, the news is supposed to inform you, but I don't feel very informed. So anyways, that's the video. It was just me ranting about the news. I'm sorry, but I just don't understand what the point of the news really is anymore. Maybe that's my own delusion, but by all means, tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you actually, like, look at the news, and do you get anything from it? Am I just being dumb? Like, tell me what you think in the comments below, because I just don't see it, my dudes. I do not see any info in that news. So, and I know I'm generalizing, but I'm just talking about, like, main news broadcasting sources, mass media, things like that. I just don't find any good information anymore. So, that was the video. Thank you so much for watching, my people. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Slater.